Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Friends of Flight 93 virtual speaker series. My name is Brooke Neal. I'm the Director of Programs with the Friends of Flight 93. Just a quick reminder, you can submit questions for our guests through the control panel, and you can submit a chat message or a question at any time during today's program. So just a little bit of an intro on who the Friends are. The Friends of Flight 93 are the nonprofit partner of the National Park Service at Flight 93 National Memorial. The Friends provide resources and volunteer support, as well as raise funds to ensure the memorial maintains its relevancy for generations to come. We focus on educating the public and the next generation on the story of Flight 93, supporting environmental programs like Plant a Tree at Flight 93 and the Pollinator Project, as well as support National Park Service programs like the September 11 observance. And one of the many educational programs that we support is the speaker series. This digital lecture series showcases speakers with direct ties to Flight 93 and the response to the September 11, 2001 terror attacks to share how the events of 9/11 changed lives and the country. Moderating today's program is Matt LeBlanc. Matt is a volunteer ambassador at the memorial and a member of the Friends, and on 9/11, he was in flight school training to be a pilot and has a unique understanding of today's topic and a deep connection to Flight 93. Today, Matt works in higher education and he lives in Washington, D.C., the intended destination of Flight 93. So Matt, I will let you take it from here.
Thanks so much, Brooke. I'm very happy to welcome our guest tonight, Mr. Tony James. Tony served more than 31 years with the Federal Aviation Administration, including 16 years as an air safety investigator and investigator in charge. He worked on a number of high-profile cases, including Malaysian 17, the missing Malaysian 370, Asiana 214 in San Francisco, TWA Flight 800 in New York, and John F. Kennedy Jr.'s crash in Massachusetts. On September 11, 2001, Tony was on the FAA's GO team and became the FAA investigator in charge who responded to the Flight 93 crash site and led the effort to find the black boxes. He also served as a technical advisor to the FBI for criminal operations. He's president of the Tony James Aviation Investigations, an international aviation safety and security consultant in private practice. Welcome, Tony.
Matt, I want to thank you and Brooke, and it's really a pleasure to be invited to this.
We're incredibly happy to have you, and I'm so excited for you to share your experience with everybody who's joining us tonight. And we want to jump right in, and if you could tell us about the morning of September 11th and how you ended up responding to the crash of Flight 93.
Well, that morning was an absolute beautiful morning. I was sitting in my office and I overlooked the memorial, the Washington Memorial, and I was looking out there and how beautiful the sky was when I got a call from my boss to be ready to go to New York because they'd had an airplane crash in New York. And so I was getting prepared to go, and we were getting ready to go to I live in the town of Manassas, Virginia, and I was getting ready to go up there, and I was going to be packing my bags. I was going home to pack my bags, and on the way out of the FAA headquarters in Washington, we were going around the building of the Pentagon when the Pentagon was hit, and we could feel the shock, the aftershock in our car as I was being taken to the train station. And when I got home, I was told, first of all, there was no communications. That was the other thing that happened. We had no phones, no nothing, and all we had was a pager system. We could text back and forth, the old style pagers that most people have no idea what they are anymore. But anyway, the old style pagers, and I was communicating back and forth with my boss, and he said, pack your bags and be ready to go up to the Ronald Reagan Airport, to the Hangar 6, to be ready to go to New York, because he thought that's where I was going to go. And when I got up there, when I left my house to get up to Washington, I could see all the people leaving the Washington area. And then I arrived at the Washington airport, and I was waiting orders on exactly where to go. We had the FAA airplanes ready to go, and that's how it all started.
Mm-hmm. And then can you talk to us about kind of your trip to Shanksville? What was that like when you departed DCA? And then once you got to Shanksville, what was it like arriving in town?
Well, we got ready to depart, and as we were taking off, it was kind of a very unusual situation. We had known that the FAA was putting all the airplanes on the ground. It was a mass landing of everything. So as we got in our Gulfstream to go up there, the tower said they cleared us to taxi, they cleared us for takeoff, they cleared us to any altitude you want to go to at any airspeed, and cleared us to land. And while we were sitting there on the ramp, so we taxied out and we went up to Shanksville. And on the way up there, we did a overfly of the crash site. And you can see from that picture as one of what it looks like. And you can see the little small black indication in the indication in the center of the black area where the airplane was. And you can see how the scatter pattern of the fuel that came out of the bottom of the wings set the trees on fire. You can also see to the right-hand side the little blue tent. That was our hazmat tent where we we went through there and we took all our boots off, our clothes, and we had to put our poopy suits on and all our boots on, and that's the decontamination tent that the FBI had set up there. And after we did our flyby, we went back to Somerset and landed at Somerset, and then I was met by the FBI there. And then we went from there back to Shanksville.
Gotcha. So, you know, in your initial flyover of the site and the kind of picture we're looking at, you mentioned the spray pattern of the fuel. Is there anything else that kind of came to mind looking down at the crash site of Flight 93?
Actually, how small the area was of impact. You could see that when the big jet hits going that fast, they hit the ground, you know, at a fairly steep angle and a real high airspeed. And usually the airplane totally disintegrates. So what we were looking at is we did a flyby. We did several overflights of it, and everybody in the airplane, there was only 4 of us or 5 of us in the airplane, but we were all trying to get a good picture of the lay of the land to see what was around it. And you can see back up in the top center of it, there's a little lake up there. That became an issue, not a significant issue, but it did become an issue, that little lake did. And there were several little areas that burned in there that caught on fire with all the jet fuel coming out of the airplane and being ignited by the engines.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thanks. So, you know, knowing that you were going to be investigating this crash, it was clear that the black boxes were going to become a major piece of evidence in determining what happened to Flight 93. You know, different than the other crash sites at the World Trade Center, it was a crash, a building fire, and then the collapse of the building. So none of the 4 recorders from the 2 airplanes were ever recovered. At the Pentagon, both boxes were recovered, but the cockpit voice recorder was so badly damaged, it wasn't able to yield any useful information. So everybody knew that Shanksville would be the best hope to understand what happened inside the airplane using that cockpit voice recorder. Can you explain to us, what are the black boxes? Why are they so important for putting together the final moments of the larger story of what happens in an airplane's crash?
Well, the biggest thing about the boxes is there's two boxes, and of course, with your picture there, you can see they're definitely not black. They're bright orange. And one of them is a cockpit voice recorder, which listens to the sounds of all the things you can hear in the airplane. Normally, the way they've set up, there's a microphone that the pilots use on the right and the left side. Those are individual channels, and we have what we call a CAM, a cockpit area mic, which is an overhead mic that picks up all the surrounding sounds that the microphones, the headsets, do not pick up. But the biggest thing we were trying to do is, we knew the boxes were a big deal. We knew we had to find the boxes, but once we set up the FBI was setting up the command center, our main objective really was to recover the victims. That was the first and foremost thing. The victims had to be recovered. And the second thing, we knew that there was probably no vital evidence in the way the airplane was destroyed, that the boxes became the lifeline to find it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, that's great. So we're looking at these 2 pictures, the cockpit voice recorder, the flight data recorder on one side of the screen, and the cockpit. You mentioned the different places around the cockpit where the voices or the sounds of the events are being picked up. You know, if you've ever visited the Flight 93 Memorial, there's a cockpit voice recorder on display, so folks can actually see what that looks like. And both of these, correct me if I'm wrong, but they're stored in the back of the airplane, the idea being that if the airplane does crash, they're in the most survivable location.
That's correct. They're located in the aft part of the tail of the airplane. Both these boxes were located on the overhead section on the left side, right above the lavatories on the left side in the tail of the airplane. That's where these 2 boxes were located.
That's great, thank you. So knowing that we're searching for these black boxes, you arrived at the crash site. How did it come to be that you were the lead investigator for the efforts to find these black boxes, as this was a joint investigation with the local, state authorities, the FBI, and the NTSB, all combined, these numerous agencies, to search for these 2 boxes? How did you come to be the person in charge of that search?
Well, the way it started out, I was sitting in the back of the room, and I knew that that I really didn't have anything to offer because I knew this was a criminal investigation. It was a crash, and I knew that the FAA would play probably no part in any of this whatsoever. So what had happened, the room, our command center was set up, and the gentleman who was running the investigation for the FBI, the SAC, the special agent in charge was running it, went around the room and was asking different people, actually asked everyone who had any kind of dealings with crash investigations. And basically no one had said a word until it come to me in the back of the room. And I told them that I had just came back from Adana, Turkey, digging a Turkish Airlines 737 out of a hole over there. And that this was about my 6th or 7th one to work. Well, that's how it came into being. They said, okay, this is yours. This is what we want you to do. And that's how it all got started. I didn't realize.
You just mentioned.
I'm sorry. I said I didn't realize at the time I was going to be doing this. I thought I was just going to be a person that sat on the sidelines and would just support the FBI and support anyone else.
I was going to ask about the FBI because you just mentioned that this was going to be a criminal investigation rather than a normal FAA investigation. How did that differ? What was that like, kind of working under the FBI's control of the situation, or were you given free reign because you were the FAA expert on the site?
I was given totally free reign. The way it worked was each one of the people, well, first of all, when you got authorization to go into where the hole was, you can see the hole behind me back there. The way we're digging it out, you can see what was involved in it. And they had to be one person to run the whole deal. And that one person was me. And what I was doing was basically having certain people like line up the equipment to dig the hole, getting the sifters lined up, getting the right people. And we used the people from United Airlines because they were the most familiar with the airplane. We got them to do a lot of the work for us inside the hole. And it was very restrictive on who was allowed in there and who was not allowed in there. And access was very, 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 very tight, as you can imagine. But the way it was worked out is usually there was an FBI agent that stayed with me the whole time, from the time he picked me up in Somerset and took me to the accident or to the crash site. It wasn't an accident. It was a crash site. He stayed with me the whole time. He and I did everything together.
Sure, sure. So, you mentioned being able to fly over the site when you first arrived in Somerset and kind of getting a brief glimpse of the impact crater and then the burn pattern in the trees. When you arrived down at the actual crash site in the field, what did you see and how did it inform where you thought the investigation was going to be going?
Well, as you can see on the picture to the left, that was the accident. That's where the hole was for the airplane that hit the ground. As you can see, it was about maybe 35 or 40 feet in length, 50 feet in the length. It was maybe about 3 or 4 feet in depth. And people were walking up to it basically saying, where's the airplane? Where's the airplane? But when we walked around the crash site, we could see here was parts of the engines and parts of the landing gear, the real big, heavy, major part structure of the airplane. And then we started walking around it and everybody said, do you know where the airplane is? I said, absolutely, I know where it is. It's right in that hole right there. Well, first of all, they couldn't understand how there was nothing there. The airplane could be there that weighed, 300,000 pounds. How did it disappear? A Boeing 767-200 disappear in a hole. Well, once I explained to them how the airplane hits the ground, how it displaces the earth, puts the earth up in the sky as the airplane just keeps penetrating under speed. This airplane hit around 490 knots, about 560 miles an hour. The airplane hit with so much force that it just took the earth, moved it out of there. And then once the airplane was disintegrated and became tiny little bitty pieces, then all the earth just came right back down and filled the airplane hole right up. It took a lot of people to dig the hole and to see pieces of the parts coming out to really understand that that's what was going on. And they had no idea where to start looking for the Cockpit Voice Recorder and 5-day recorder. And I told them that it's going to be at least probably 25 to 35 feet under the ground, because the one in Adana, Turkey, I think was 42 feet under the ground when we dug it out. So I knew that's what we were going up against.
Right, right. I think these are really powerful images because, a lot of times people have seen, footage on the news of an airplane crash or footage in maybe a movie, and there's huge pieces of airplane that people kind of unbuckle their seatbelt and walk out from. But like you said, this crash was just so very different because of the speed and the angle that the airplane hit the ground, being much more of a crash, like you said, rather than an accident itself. So, looking at these pictures, I know there's a couple of different things going on here. Can you talk to us about the search for the black boxes and kind of some of the techniques you used in finding those?
Well, the search was just total labor of digging the hole out and making sure that we found a way to get to it. That particular picture on the left-hand side, I just happened to be looking at it. If you can look to the far left-hand side of the picture, how you see a like of indentation going up, that's where the tail, the inverted airplane rolled in inverted. That's the back part of the tail going into the ground right there. That's how small that hole is. The second picture you see there is what we call a sifter. The way we started out doing it, as we started recovering it, hang on just 1 second here. I don't know why they bothered me here. I thought I had all that turned off. But anyway, hey, the best laid plans. But anyway, the short and long is we used we made sifters out of 2x4s and chicken wire, and we were taking with shovels and just shifting it and getting all the pieces and parts. And then there was a gentleman who actually owned that field there, said, I have a coal sifter. And he described it to me, and I said, man, that'll work. He called it a shaker. And so I said, that'll work great. So once we found out how it worked, we then took and built the chicken wire at the top. It was 1.25 inches by 1.25 inches. I'm sorry, 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches. The next one was 1.25 inches square. And then it went on down until we ended up with a 1/4 inch square at the very bottom. As we would dump all the debris into the top of it, the sifter would work, and all the big pieces would stay at the top. The small pieces would come out the bottom, and the dirt would go onto the dirt, and then the dirt would be removed, and then all the evidence was gathered up, bagged, and tagged by the FBI's investigative unit right there. That's how we did it. On the far right-hand side, the gentleman with the yellow hat, you can see the debris of the airplane. That's the pieces and parts of the airplane. That's what we were dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
They were millions of it. The airplane just literally disintegrated.
Sure, yeah. So let's talk about when you did find the black boxes, what was that like? What kind of condition were they in, and kind of where in the crash site, or how deep down did you find them?
Well, I think that we found the first one, the flight data recorder, we found, I think, like 15 or 18 feet under the ground. And we found out, I think I made a note, it was on the
September 13th.
Yeah, 13th. We found it on the 13th. So the way it had set up was I was asked to make sure we had transportation to get these boxes back and forth to Washington. And I had arranged with Hangar 6 to have a Learjet Lear 31 based at Somerset with a crew ready to go. And so once they found the boxes, the FBI took possession of that. They took it straight up to Somerset. It went on with an FBI agent, and then they took it straight to NTSB headquarters, who downloaded all the material from the flight data recorder, so we could see all the things at the time was going on inside the airplane from the flight data recorder. Now, we didn't find the Cockpit Voice Recorder until I think the next day in the evening time of the next day.
Mm-hmm.
And that, again, our airplane had come back up there and was at Somerset. We found the boxes that night. I think it was at night. We found it like at 25, 28 feet under the ground. It was basically in a straight line to where the other one was, but we knew that we had to be close because the boxes were mounted very, very close together in the airplane fuselage. And so once we started looking for it and found it, then the FBI took possession of it. Again, we took them back to Somerset. The airplane went immediately back to Washington. And then the flight crew for the Learjet stayed at the Hangar 6 there for the FAA's Hangar 6. And then they took the CVR into the NTSB to be downloaded and listened to. But once they started disassembling the box, they found out that the little card that recorded all the voices had a crack in the center. And they realized they could not download it from there. And then they put that, secured it back up, gave it to the FBI. I made the arrangements with my airplane to take them to Renton, Washington, to Honeywell, to have it fixed, repaired, and we went from there with it.
Yeah, so, in your experience with other crashes, looking at the two pictures here, the flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder, recognizing that they were found 15 and 25 feet into the ground after an airplane impacted at 560 miles an hour, Is this a typical condition that you would find the black boxes in? Were you surprised that they were so well intact?
No, that's the way they're designed. When the FAA made the criteria for the design of the boxes, they designed them for exactly that reason. They're in a big, heavy steel case, stainless steel case. It's all machined. They have a heavy foam on the inside for a shock and impact. And for people that are curious about it, they also have pingers on them that if they go into the water, we have a pinger that lasts for 30 days. So we can use a sounder to find the pingers under the water. Just for curiosity of it, that's how we do it in the ocean.
Sure, sure. So, you found the black boxes. They were repaired, the one in Renton, and then brought back to Washington. What did the data tell you? And can you explain how important it was to get all the information from both the FDR and the CVR?
Well, the FDR data is important from the altitudes, locations, across the ground, and just the basic health of the airplane. That's what it was doing. The CVR was the communications, the conversation between the two bad guys and what eventually happened inside the airplane, the disruption inside the airplane. And once it was brought back from Renton, Washington, it was taken directly, dropped off in Washington to the FBI. I have no idea whatever happened to it from that point on. But while it was to bring this up, you asked the question about listening to the CVR. What was on the CVR? Did you ask that part of that?
Yeah, we'd love to hear kind of what kind of information did you get once you downloaded all the data and were able to reconstruct the final moments of the flight?
The flight itself, from the flight data recorder, we had altitude, airspeed, heading, G-force, control movements. We don't know on which side, where it's the right side or the left side, but we know somebody had a physical input to the ailerons, the elevator, the spoilers, the flaps, and the rudders. We know all that. And then we can take it, like your picture out there shows, we can make the animation from the flight data recorder. And in some cases, which a lot of cases, we can actually overlay the cockpit voice recorder by time and put it into what was going on. We can put the words into the flight data recorder so you can listen to it and watch it so you can know what's going on inside the airplane. I don't think in this case, nobody ever listened to the CVR. There was only 3 people. When I listened to it, it was via a telephone from Renton, Washington, and there was only 3 of us in the room. And I was listening to it to identify sounds, the overspeed warning, the clacker going off, the voices of what they were talking about, the sounds that we heard inside of there, and made note of that. I heard it twice, and that was it.
Yeah, so the reconstruction on the screen right now, there's actually a loop of that plane in the visitor center, Flight 93. This is getting towards the last minute of flight before the airplane crashed. At this point, or a couple seconds from now, when the airplane's kind of nose down and inverted, from your expert opinion, is that recoverable, or was the airplane already past the point of no return?
Well, prior to that, we know that the bad guy was putting adverse control movements to disrupt the passengers in the back. They could hear the commotion in the back of the airplane, and they knew it wasn't good. The bad guys did. So the bad guy in the left seat, I'd like to refer to him as something else, but I can't do that. But the bad guy in the left seat was doing adverse motions by rolling the airplanes, pitching the airplane, trying to throw them off their feet in the back. And that's how we ended up doing it.
Yeah, and then, from the cockpit voice recorder, since you were able to listen to that, did you come to any conclusions based on your understanding of what you heard in the recording?
I did. You like to know what?
I think, yeah. I mean, one of the things that we're able to do is read the cockpit voice recorder, but I think that's something often gets left out, right? You don't hear everything, you just hear references and stuff. So again, as somebody who's investigated lots of different crashes, what are some of the things you heard that might be unique to Flight 93 and any conclusions you might have come to?
Well, when you listen to the cockpit voice recorder, first of all, it's extremely emotional because you're standing there looking out over the crash site. That's the first thing. And you got to keep your wits about you, what you're listening to. And so one of the things that I heard first was you could hear the screaming and the commotion going on in the back of the airplane. The next thing you could hear was the sounds of something hitting the cockpit door. and you could hear the sounds. And I would anticipate it would be the beverage cart. That would be the only thing that I know that was heavy enough to bang it into the back of the door. You could hear all that. We heard things like the sounds of something splashing. We heard screams. We heard several sounds like shh, and I recognized that sound immediately as a fire extinguisher. And the next thing I remember hearing is the screaming and the yelling, the fight inside the airplane. And then after you could hear the fight, and you could hear the noise, the overspeed noise of the airplane going down. And then you could hear, I mean, there was a lot of noise right to the very impact point.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I can tell you right now every word on it, but I can't tell you. You do know this is still a formal investigation by the FBI. And,
right. And I was just going to say, different than other airplane crashes where people might be able to, you know, go to YouTube and hear the Cockpit Voice Recorder. The only thing we have is the transcripts, because it is still an ongoing FBI investigation. But, you know, that's why I have folks like you to combine both the Cockpit Voice Recorder and the flight data recorder to get that whole picture of what happened on the airplane. You know, after finding the black boxes and getting that whole picture, what was the rest of the investigation like? Because it did continue for a little bit longer, and there was still more evidence to collect.
There was a lot of evidence to correct, because you got to remember that the crash site itself was about 85 or 90 feet by about 90 feet. And we ended up digging a total depth, I think, of around 40 feet is where we ended up at. And that's when we found no more residue of the airplane. We found no more pieces and parts at about 40 feet, so we called it quits. But the way we did this thing was, we knew that once the boxes were found and the HR, the human remains, we found pieces and parts of, you know, unfortunately, I have to say this, we tried to recover everything we could find, because we owed it to all the families to get everything we can find. And I know in my heart we did. You know, we got everything. And I'd like to go and say that to all the folks that are listening, we did our very, very best to get everything that we could possibly get. And that's the way it was, because this airplane was really, really mangled up. It was destroyed. It hit with so much impact force. And it's one of the worst I've ever seen, by the way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And one of the things you had shared with us previously is, you know, being asked to find the cockpit seats, and you shared how kind of unrealistic that was. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. Well, one of the FBI agents, he walked up to me and he said, Tony says, we have got to find the seats and see who's strapped in the seats. And I looked at him, I said, partner, there are no seats and there are no people. He said, what do you mean? I said, this airplane, you know, when it hit at 600 knots or 690 knots, I said, the people disintegrate. There's nobody left in the front of that airplane. And he said, you've got to be kidding me. I said, no. So once we started digging the airplane out of the ground, in his mind, he wanted to get fingerprints and DNA off the bad guys. Well, once we started digging, he came up to me and said, you know, he said, I could not believe what a foolish question that was, because he said, there are no seats, there are nothing. I said, that's right. Mm-hmm. But, you know, he'd always had a lot of questions. He was a very, very young man from Pittsburgh, and he was adorable because he had such unique questions, because he was really curious. He'd never seen anything like this. And most people haven't. None of the other folks had been there, had ever dealt with this. It was very unusual. You know, but to me, this is what I do.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say, we have some pictures of things that were found at the crash site. If you want to talk us through some of the images on the screen.
Well, I can't really, let me see if I can see what the one on the left side is.
So the first one is a seatbelt, it looks like.
It is a seatbelt.
Yep.
Put my old man glasses on here.
That's right.
It is. And the next side was where you can see the two windows, the part of the fuselage it was found. That was found actually once the airplane started coming apart. That's part of the aft section that was found just a little bit away from the actual hole in the ground. And the last thing, the last picture there is very sentimental to me, because when I walked into the accident or to the crash site, and I was walking up there to it, I saw this piece of metal that was rolled up in like a figure S. And I, you know, being an investigator, I'm always saying, I wonder what that is and what it's going to tell me. So I reached down and I picked it up. It was a real thin piece of aluminum, and I turned it over, and there was the flag. And all of a sudden, it was just like a tingly feeling came over me. If you look at the side of the airplane, the picture of the airplane right there, It's mounted, it's a small picture of the flag that's painted on the side of the airplane right near the registration number, the N number of the airplane. Now, to this day, I'm not sure where that piece of metal went to, because once I recovered it and I gave it to the FBI agent that was with me, I'm not sure where it ended up. I was hoping that it would end up with you folks, but I have no earthly idea where it is today. But it was a significant piece for me to find.
Yeah, that's really great, and I'm glad you brought that up, because you know, the American flag is painted next to the N number on both sides of the airplane, and I know that at least one side of the airplane, that flag is at the World Trade Center Museum in New York City. So I'm not sure if the other side was ever found, but folks can see that at the 9/11 Memorial and Museum in New York.
We only found one.
Okay, so yeah, that's the one then. You know, Tony, how much longer did you stay at the site and continue the investigation?
Well, you know, I think I was there about another week, another 10 days. And by then we were at the bottom of the getting down to the bottom, and we had all the sifting was done. All the pieces and parts that we could possibly put together were put in these huge bins, and then put evidence tags on it. We did not try to identify pieces and parts. We identified left and right engine, left and right main, landing gear, nose gear, stuff that like that, but the pieces and parts of the airplane was just absolutely hard to do. We didn't even try to do it because we knew that was not a factor. That was a perfectly good airplane that they put into the ground.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then I stayed. I'm sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, I know it's to your credit and the work that you did in finding both the evidence of the airplane crash itself and the passengers and crew, that ultimately, you know, 95% of the airplane was recovered. And it went until December, but on December 19th of 2001 is when the last passenger was positively identified using DNA. So it's to your credit and to your team that you continue that search well beyond just the black boxes.
Well, thank you. You know, I didn't know that. I had not heard that.
Yeah. So, you know, once the investigation wrapped up, years have gone by, and I'm curious, have you ever been back to the Flight 93 Memorial, and what was that like for you?
Well, my wife and I went back up to the initial dedication, and then we went up to the I was invited to come up to do one of the luminaries up there. I was part of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I came up to do the oral history. And while I was doing the oral history up there, I asked a young lady by the name of Kathy Schaefer if I could possibly go down and see it. And she's made arrangements for me to go down there. We walked through the weeds down through there, and it was before it was ever a memorial by even. And the rock was there, or the big boulder was there. And we were looking at it, and I thought that's about the right place. That's about where it was, because right to the right-hand side of that is a big mound of dirt that we use for our little command center, that everybody had the little, you know, talking to sleeve radios and that kind of stuff that we had mounted up there. So we could, all the senior people on the ground could communicate to know what everybody was doing. And then Kathy was well enough to let me just have a few minutes there, because she knew it had been a long time since I'd been there. And it was very emotional, I got to tell you. And it's been emotional ever since. And I went back up for the dedication of the Tower of Voices. Betty and I went up for that. And that was very emotional also. And because I could go down, and I took enough time to go down and walk along the wall and see the wall again, and then stand there and look at the boulder down there and see what's there, and see the names and the things that are on it, and the flags and the coins and the different things that are there. It's heart-wrenching to listen and see this.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope to come back again. I've just commenting before this came on. It's 20 years, and it's hard to believe it's 20 years coming up next year.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that just means I'm 20 years older is all that means.
Yeah, young in spirit, Tony, young in spirit. But of course, we would welcome you back anytime. I think it's, you know, one of the things you mentioned to us before is that you are so sure that's where the boulder is supposed to be placed, because again, you helped analyze the data from the flight data recorder. So you know the lat long of where the boulder should be. So we know we're honoring the right location. And I think that's, you know, even today, the legacy of the FAA and that relationship with the Flight 93 site continues. You know, in 2011, the FAA dedicated a waypoint, a navigation point right over the impact site, right where that boulder is. So pilots today get to navigate using what's called the Guardian waypoint. Guardian representing and honoring the passengers and crew of Flight 93 who prevented the plane from reaching Washington, D.C. So all the work that you started, that day on September 11th continues on, and the pilots today still use that same location to help them navigate safely through the skies. So I'm so happy that the FAA did that to kind of honor the work that you started many, many years ago, almost 20 years ago.
I actually recognize those numbers, the Latin alons.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's great. Tony, thank you so much. I'm going to give it back to Brooke, but I really, really appreciate you having this conversation with us. As somebody who studied aviation and has my pilot's license, it was great to talk to you and to hear kind of the FAA experience that you had.
I'd like to say one more thing, if you don't mind.
Please.
It was an honor to be invited to speak, and I just want to thank you and Brooke very much for inviting me. This was very, very emotional to me, I got to tell you.
We loved having you. It's really important for you to share this experience and for us to have this documented so we could share it with generations and many more visitors to come.
Yeah, I was just going to reiterate that point, Tony, and just say thank you to you, because we say it all the time, to have these first-person accounts is just so invaluable to us to be able to tell kind of a deeper story about, Flight 93 and what happened on that day and what happened in the weeks coming with the investigation. So I'm so thankful you're here. And as Matt said, we just want to be able to continue to support these educational programs and outreach efforts and make sure that we keep telling this story to, the next generation and then tomorrow's generation and have it keep continue. But we do have a couple of questions. So if you're ready for a Q&A session, I'll read aloud some of these questions for you. So the first one really was, how long does the Cockpit Voice Recorder record? And then how easy is it for you to really understand the recordings when you're listening back?
There's two versions of the flight data recorder. Was it the Cockpit Voice Recorder they asked the question about?
Yeah, the CVR.
Okay, it's 2 hours. The older versions were only 30 minutes, but the newer versions in this particular one was 2 hours.
And are they relative, like when you listen back to them, I'm sure just with your decades of experience, that is it easy for you to understand them and pick up, language versus a noise?
Actually, it depends on the airplane. Some airplanes are very, very quiet in the cockpit and you can hear everything. Some airplanes are very noisy by the wind going by the windows and the noise from the airplane. Sometimes it's very, very difficult to listen to them. Sometimes the filters that are used can filter out certain frequency noises to make it easier to hear. We can isolate the right, like I was telling you about, the pilot and the co-pilot have headsets. We can actually isolate right and left side to take away all the noise from that would be ambient air coming across those. Then we could also do the same thing for the CAM, the cockpit area mic.
Okay.
But they are very, very hard to listen to as far as sound goes. You've got to pay really, really, really strong attention to them.
Wow. Okay. Another question is, when you head to a crash site, is there anything specific that you take with you?
Well, actually, yes. When you go to a crash site, you never know when your next meal is going to be or when your next drink of water is going to be. So in my go bag, I always had lots of goodies stowed aside. And you never know if you're going to go to a hot part of the world or a cold part of the world. So in my closet, I had 2 sets of clothes. I had a hot side and a cold side. So if I knew I was going to be going down to South America, down to Colombia or wherever, that'd be the warm side of the clothes. And if I was going to be going to Anchorage, Alaska in the wintertime, that'd be the heavy side of the clothes. And I just throw them into my bag. I could do it in 7.5 minutes. I could be packed and gone in 7.5 minutes max.
Wow. Wow. Okay. That makes a lot of sense, though.
Well, we had a 2-hour window. Once we were notified that we had to be to be ready to launch at the hangar, we had a 2-hour window. 2 hours. Okay. And that means whatever you have to do, you have to be back, because once the airplane got ready to go, it didn't wait for you. It was gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Okay. So the next question is basically, what's the difference in how you work a criminal, criminal investigation versus how you work an accident crash site? Is there a difference?
Well, a lot of difference, lots of difference. A crash site where it's really truly an accident, the only people that go to, it depends on if it's a large airplane or a small airplane. If it's a relatively small airplane, not a commuter airplane or not an air carrier airplane, usually there'll be one or two FAA guys, usually a maintenance guy and an operations guy, usually one NTSB guy, the manufacturer, and then of the airplane and the engine manufacturer, and that's all it would be. But when there's a large airplane crash, it usually consists of I may have a team as large as maybe 45 to 50 people. Depending on weather, airplanes, I'd have a test pilot, I'd have an airports person, I'd have a communications person, I'd have an airworthiness person, I'd have a full team, I'd have a medical team there. Oh yeah, there's usually, my teams normally run about 35 to 40 people.
Wow. Oh, we've got lots of questions rolling in, so I'm just going to keep asking them if you don't mind.
No, I don't mind.
Okay, so the next question was really, what did you use to search and dig the hole, and what kind of precautions did you have to take in the Flight 93 investigation when you're trying to find, pieces of a plane and what you're looking for?
Well, the first thing was the biological part of it. Once we got up to the tent and we put on our blue suits and our mask and all on the boots and everything like that, the gloves, we were not allowed to take anything in with us to eat or drink or anything. And then once you got in there, we tried to limit it 30 minutes to 45 minutes due to the heat, because those suits are really, really hot. I'd walk out there, my boots would be full of water. I could take and dump the water out of my boots. But that's the one thing. But that was my responsibility of my FAA team that I had there, plus the team that was dead in the hole, is that they didn't get overexerted, and that I was actually responsible for all their health to make sure that they took care of themselves. And that was a big deal too, to make sure that was done. And a couple of people volunteered to help to watch over the other side of the groups too. If you ever noticed, I don't know if you had any pictures to show the actual, when we were digging the hole, we brought in several excavators to the hole itself was like an inverted wedding cake. The little hole at the bottom, as it goes up and up and up, it was like an inverted wedding cake. So we started digging way out and just work our way down to the very bottom until we know that there's nothing else left. And then the vehicles just track back up on the same route that they come up. And that's how we did it. And one at the bottom would put the dirt in the next one would take it up and then put the dirt in another one. And we just kept doing it. We had normally 3 to 4 excavators there to do this, backhoe type deals.
This kind of rolls off of that, basically. The question was, did you have good weather during the whole investigation period? I'm sure there was a backup plan to cover the site if we had rain or whatnot.
There's no backup site, no nothing. It was as is where it is. And it was good weather the whole time. It was good weather. And I've got to say one thing. The volunteers up there, the people, the Red Cross, the ladies who came out there and brought us all kinds of goodies. I mean, just the local people were just absolutely wonderful. I cannot express it. And one of my favorite things I have is a little lady made for me. She came up to me, and I had my FAA hat on, and she gave me this little tiny emblem that was cut out of cloth. It was red, white, with a little blue with a little white star in the center. That's on my head. I don't wear it anymore. It's put in my display case, but that's one of the most precious things I own, is that little piece of cloth, because it means something to me by her walking up that road and giving it to me. But the Red Cross and the local people, just, I cannot express my gratitude to those folks. Remember I was telling you about lack of water and nothing to eat? They took care of us.
Good. This kind of goes back to what you touched on first, or early on in the presentation, about what point you actually learned you were going to respond in Somerset as opposed to New York.
Well, the way it happened was once I got home, my boss was on the phone, and Bud said, via the text deal, he says, we have no idea if we could ever find the recorders at the fires and at the towers. And we know from the Pentagon, the chances of finding anything there would be slim. our only chance of finding any evidence is Somerset, and that's where you're going to go, and that's where we went. It was by process of elimination of finding the recorders. That's what it boiled down to.
Mhm.
And to tell you one other thing, I was not only at Shanksville, I came back home, and then I went to the Pentagon. I was at the Pentagon 3 days, and then I went to New York, and I was up there for, I don't know, a long time, digging pieces and parts out of up there, identifying parts.
Wow.
So I was at all 3 places.
Yeah, which I don't think many people can say. You certainly had an experience on that day. So I also wanted to share just a couple comments that were rolling in, basically saying that they have great respect for your career choice and thanking you for your services over these years and decades. And another one was just acknowledging just your your presentation skills, and that you experienced a lot on that day, and that they greatly appreciate you sharing your story with all of us. So I wanted to make sure I shared those comments with you. So there was, we might just have 1 or 2 questions left here. One was, I'm not sure if you know the question, but what was the last regional airport tower to know where Flight 93 was?
The last regional tower, I don't know, but I do know they went by Somerset because some of the people identified the airplane at Somerset and said it was extremely low and going extremely fast. And I think that's the only one I actually heard of. I don't know of actually Towered Airport. I don't even know. I don't know. I don't know. You know what? I don't even know if Somerset was a Towered Airport or not. I don't remember off the top of my head. Because once we landed there, we got out of the airplane, we were met by the FBI and the Sheriff's Department, you know, and the United Airlines 727 had landed in front of us, and they're taking their people off. So I actually don't know. I do not know. Never thought about that. Good question.
Yeah, it is a good question. Definitely a good question. Okay, well, I think we're gonna wrap it up from there. And basically, I just wanted to thank everybody for attending this evening's virtual speaker series. I want to thank you again, Tony. Thank you, Matt, for moderating. You guys did a fantastic job. And just remind everybody that the 19th observance is coming up this September 11th on Friday, September 11th. So that will actually be live streamed from EarthCam. So we encourage you to watch virtually and help us honor and remember the passengers and crew members this September. And we're working on scheduling some additional virtual speaker series programs. So we should have more coming to you in the near future. And we hope you'll join us again. So thank you, everybody. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.